The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Dealing with Conflict. Just to make sure that my audio is being heard on your end, being as how you're all on mute, if somebody could just type into the question box that you can hear me, please. Thank you very much. Okay. To those of you participating, this session will be recorded. So once the session is over, you will receive notification of the availability of that recording. This is an interactive session. You are all on mute, but your input as we go forward today is important. And so at the end, any questions that come up for you as that we're discussing this idea of conflict, I would like you to just present them in the question box at the end for me. Now, to those of you who are participating for the first time, just a little background. MeasureX has been working in the power and utility industry for about the last 17 years. Our focus is looking at how to help those organizations improve those service and sales interactions. We also do a lot of leadership and coach training after any kind of training we've done for a company to support the ongoing efforts of any training we've done for an organization. And we've been doing this for about 17 years, and we have a cross-section of utilities from across the United States that we have worked with. The objectives today are simple. We want to look at how do we de-escalate emotional customer situations. You as organizations, the vast majority of calls that you take in a given day, given week, are somebody that either wants something or they're not happy about something. And an important part as we go forward, and this will come up a couple times, is questions. How to appropriately control a conversation when you have somebody that is upset or emotional. Another factor that plays in helping reduce conflict is simply documentation on a conversation, why it's important. And I know you have them, those customers that go from just being upset, unfriendly to abusive. Now, in the work I do for you as an industry, I listen to a lot of recorded conversations that you have with your customers every week. Some of them are already really upset when they pick up the phone, and sometimes it just escalates. So, first poll today, just to get a sense, create the interactivity, and kind of see where you are. The question is, have you been frustrated, upset, or unhappy with a company because of a poor service experience in the last 90 days? If you would be so kind to answer yes or no to that, please. And the results say that basically the vast majority of you in the last 90 days have had some kind of poor experience. So why did you have a poor experience? The reasons are endless based on whatever that situation is. The question is why did you become emotional? Why do customers become emotional in some of those interactions? And for many of those interactions, from the customer's point of view, it's their expectations, what their perception or expectation was of what should have happened in that interaction didn't. When those expectations aren't met, they have a tendency to get a little upset, as did you in some of your experiences. Now, when we as customers have what we'll call a lack of service, poor service experience, are we always rational? The answer is no, because we have entered an emotional state. The same thing goes for your customers. when their expectations haven't been met, they sometimes aren't rational either. So, second question. Have you provided training on working with emotional customer situations in the last 12 months? Let's just see where you are. Give you just a minute to complete that. The results say that basically about 55% of you haven't, but 45% of you have. That's great. Those of you that have made the investment in helping your people be comfortable in those emotional situations, because this is one of the most toughest situations your team deals with every day, is interacting with those customers that are not always rational. That being said, let's look at dealing with those. In a conversation you're having with a customer, if they are upset or emotional, what happens is conflict starts. If you are not in control of that conversation, they will be. We want to look at a couple of the key aspects. In the calls I listen to, naturally, we all as individuals have internal to us what is called a fight or flight mechanism. It is built into that brain of ours. When we feel threatened, stress, we either want to run away from a situation or we want to fight. For your people that are interacting with customers, naturally, they cannot walk away from most of those. They're trying to deal with a customer, and many of those are on the phone. The challenge is when the customer's voice raises, and I hear it in all the calls I listen to when there's an emotional customer, the tendency of that other individual is to raise their voice. Why? Because they enter fight mode. And so naturally, when voice tone changes, the fight is now on in those conversations. Key part in any of your training is helping them with voice inflection. Customer name. Why would we want to use a customer name when we are dealing with an emotionally upset customer? Why? Because we want to create that connection. Most of those customers feel like they're just a number. Creating that personal connection can just help diffuse it because they feel that they are important in the conversation. And that is a missed opportunity in most of the calls I listen to. This one we're going to spend a little more time on later. This is about that emotional interaction. How do you shift people? Because we know when they're emotional, they're not always rational. How do you reduce the emotion in those conversations? And my favorite, and I hear this, I listened to a group of calls yesterday that this came up on, is a customer called in. They were already a little defensive when they picked up the phone and called, and now the representative became engaged in that conversation. And as the person was telling their story, the representative, because they've entered defense mode, they started interrupting the customer to share their point of view. One of the toughest things not to do, but happens in most because of the emotion we get involved in. So those of you who are on the call, some of you are clients of ours, let's see what you remember. When we are having a phone interaction with someone, what percentage of that conversation is the words that we're actually using, and what percent of that is that voice inflection? The vast majority, naturally on the phone, is voice. And what happens when the situation escalates, that individual on the other end of the phone has a tendency to raise their voice, and that changes the communication. Does every customer have a story? The answer is every time they pick up the phone, they are telling you their story, whatever their problem, their issue, their concern is. Your people are listening to stories every day from customers. The challenge is that they have heard those stories thousands of times before because that's part of what they do every day. And what happens is sometimes they have a tendency to tune out the customer as they are telling the story. And for a customer who's already a little emotionally upset, and maybe they've told the story, and now the representative is asking them questions when the customer already gave them that information, all it has a tendency to do is just add a little fuel to the situation. Important is this. I want to make sure as the person listening to the customer that I really understand what they are telling me. Words mean different things to different people. And in many of those conversations I listen to, the representative had made an assumption. They had a perception. There wasn't clarity. And when there isn't clarity of communication, that's when misunderstandings take place. Did I summarize? If they've given me a real, what I'll call a little more in-depth explanation of whatever their issue is, did I summarize to make sure what I heard was what they were trying to communicate? And one of my favorites. What happens when we are on the phone interacting with customers and that adrenaline starts to pump, that blood pressure rises, our ability to think rationally sometimes diminish. And in that, sometimes we use words and phrases because we have entered fight mode that may not be appropriate to helping us diffuse an emotional situation. Those that you see there before you, I have heard each and every one of them on customer interactions, on recorded conversations. My favorite one is the one at the bottom. If you will let me finish. You have certain policies, procedures in place. There are certain rules that your organization operates under. But just simply telling somebody that's company policy, it's not our policy, is not helping the customer understand. Help them, tell them the why. Why does this work this way? Give them a little better explanation to help them have a different sense than its company policy. We're going to look at the power of questions. Talked about questions just a couple minutes ago. Questions in your interactions with customers is critical. Open-ended questions and closed-ended are going to help us in a variety of different ways with emotional customers. Open-ended questions are simply those questions where we want to get that person talking. We want to understand their issue, their problem, what's taking place. What are they seeing from their point of view? If we are going to resolve an issue, we need to see it from the customer's point of view. If we start a question with either the words what, how, when, where, why, tell me about, describe to me, we are now creating a question that the customer can't simply answer yes or no to. They need to give us more information. In so doing, they're talking, we're listening. And that brings us to the important part of how to diffuse emotion. We as individuals, when we are upset, frustrated, or emotionally unhappy, we are in what's called right brain activity. That's where all of those emotional parts of us come from, our creative part. When we go there, it's because, and when we go there, we're not always in a rational state. When the representative is engaging that person to get that person talking, that customer has to shift from that right brain function, where all that the emotion is taking place for them right now, to left brain function. Because in order to answer that open-ended question, they have to go to the reasoning and logic side. when we create that dialogue of that interaction, it shifts from emotion to reasoning, done appropriately. Now, this question will not work in every situation, but it will work in some. As you can see, it's an open-ended question. Why do we use open-ended questions? We want to get people talking to us. We want to understand their situation or issue. The key part is, if I've asked that question as a representative, do I have that level of empowerment to now create a solution when it's something that we as a company may have done wrong, didn't follow through on, mistake, something that's inconvenience. Based on research, it is proven that when we can identify what the customer wanted from us in order to make this situation right, in most cases, it will cost the company far less time and money than sometimes what a company might have offered as a solution. Sometimes, from the customer standpoint, it might simply be just an apology, something very small that for them was missing based on what did happen in that experience. Closed-ended questions are simply the exact opposite of open-ended. We're using closed-ended questions when we want people to simply give us yes or no answers only. The objective simple is we're trying to create appropriate control of that conversation to understand the customer's concern, problem, or issue. Now, you have what I call, from my point of view and working with the industry for 17 years, what I'll call two groups of customers that are what we'll call sometimes emotional. You have what are your customers that have some kind of service issue, question, complaint, or problem, and then you have customers that for whatever reason are struggling to pay you. Working with non-pay customers or delinquents is one of the more challenging situations. And here's what I find in listening to the calls I listen to, that many of those organizations do not always have what I'll call clearly defined standards when it comes to extensions of payment. And so what happens if one representative says, no, we can't do that, those people that you have, I call them your professionals, they do this on a regular basis, they will just try and call another representative to get a different answer. So, do you have specific written job aids to make it easy for employees to explain whether it's the late fee, the late reconnects, how disconnect works, as far as specifically to address customer issues? Because when the emotions are on in disconnects, somebody's out of service at their house, naturally the representative may not always be clear in communicating how your process or procedure works. So, high bill complaints. Naturally, this time of year, many of you in this country are having an increase in call volume simply because that customer is now getting a bill that is higher than they are used to seeing. And yes, it's hotter, weather factors, all of those things play into it, but naturally some of those people really struggle in making those monthly payments. If you have in your system online access available for your customers, I am going to recommend that every representative, whether they're coming back to you for service request, if they are a new customer, are making sure, if they have that capability, that we are setting them up for online access. Now, why do we want to do that? Because when they call in with a high bill complaint, if we can now, if they have that access, and we can now visually, with them at their computer, and myself at mine as the representative, show them their usage on a given week, day, or month. When they can visually understand it, it's going to help diffuse or eliminate those people complaining about their high bills. Another is, and when it's appropriate, and I think this is a missed opportunity in many situations, is an energy audit. Many of you offer that capability, but in the calls that I listen to when there is a high bill complaint, it is rare that I hear someone suggest, let's set somebody out to see if we can help you save on your energy. It's a great tool to use. It builds rapport, makes the customer feel that somebody cares. And naturally, if we've gone out and done an energy audit, and next month they have a high bill complaint, we'd look to see if they have followed any of the suggestions that they received in the energy audit. It's going to help diffuse future interactions if we know that. And in the appropriate situation, this is another one that I think in many situations is a missed opportunity to reduce high bill complaints. If representatives are helping the customer understand the benefit of budget billing, a lot of people might consider that to just prevent those highs and lows in their bill, especially if the representative is really selling benefit. Reduces call volume. Do customers ever stretch the truth? And the answer is yes. Why? Because they want things their way. Based on the calls, interactions, observations I have in organizations across the U.S., one of the things I see that is a missed opportunity is documentation of a conversation that I had with customers. Why do we want to document conversations? Because we know that some of those people are going to call back and talk to another person if they didn't get it their way. Makes it easy for that next person to review history, identify what happened in the conversation, and reduce confrontation with customers in that regard. So that being said, there's one thing I wanted to bring in, and it is the last poll of the day. And the question is, does the company have clearly defined standards on when to offer an extension of payment for services? Do you have clearly defined rules, guidelines that every representative has and understands? Tell me what you think. And the answer is the vast majority of you do. I like that. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's look at abusive customers. We have what we'll call those upset, unhappy, frustrated customers, and then we have people that have gone past that point. And I also listen to a lot of those calls. That is a completely different situation when you're dealing with abusive customers, because they have gone past the point of what we'll call just emotion. They're using abusive language. They're threatening in some form or fashion. Key factor is, for what I'm going to do is I am now going to take control of the conversation, and doing so, an important factor is voice inflection, because naturally when people get abusive to that degree, most of us react quickly. Maintaining voice, I am simply going to let the customer know that I want to help them with their issue. But if they are going to continue using that kind of language in our conversation, or what I'll call a threatening manner, that I am going to bring our conversation to a close. I've clearly defined that, and I'm simply going to say, so tell me a little bit more about your situation. If they continue in that abusive manner, then the call is over. Now, those of you that are representatives that are listening to this call, Dave did not say if the customer's a little emotionally upset that I can hang up on them. Just for clarity, these are for abusive customer situations. As I said at the beginning, working with emotional situations, because every customer is different, the emotions they distribute, where they're coming from, their personality is a real struggle because of that. One of the things I'm going to suggest to you right now is if you have call recording software in place at your organization, the best thing you can do to help your company be more effective in handling emotional customers is to start sharing those calls with your team. I have two organizations that are on this call today that have some of the highest customer satisfaction scores in the country. As a matter of fact, one of them on the Touchstone Energy was just number 2 in the country for this quarter. Now, they, in my opinion, have achieved that result because from what I've seen in my interactions, they have one of the most effective call coaching programs in place, whether it's just in service interactions or emotional customers. When that representative can hear what happened in the call, and we can now ask them to identify how they could have changed it or improved it, and sharing that call and pointing out key parts of where the conversation switched or escalated is one of the most effective things. Now, if you say, well, Dave, I don't have call recording software, then my suggestion to you is to then start practicing with your team on how to handle those types of emotional customer situation. Use real examples, set those examples up, and just roll through that, what we'll call emotional situation. Voice inflection, am I listening? Did we ask the appropriate questions in that environment to increase their confidence level? And one of the things that we've just found in the work we do for measuring the companies that we interact with, we have found some very simple, very affordable recording tools. Meaning this, let's assume that for the customers that walk in your lobby, that it would be great if you could capture both sides of the conversation and then share that conversation with the representative. This tool is now so affordable that you can buy them for less than, I think it's like $10 or $12, that now becomes, that you could easily put on the representative's desk to record the conversation to use for coaching purposes. Now, one caveat, some states are two-party notice for recording of any conversations. If yours is one of those states and you need to check state laws, then naturally the only way that would happen is if you do notification to the customer. Same thing like on phone recordings. You know, we just notifying our customers that this call may be recorded for coaching purposes. Some states are one party, so as long as the representative knows, it's sufficient. Just to kind of clear that up, there's about 17 states that do require two-party notification. Okay. Based on what I've covered today, any questions that you have? If there's a question that came up based on what we just covered in this last 30 minutes, right now in the question box, if you will type that question in, I will answer it while we're live on this call. I'll give you a few seconds, and then I have two questions, if you do not, that other people have already provided to me. Okay, here's the first question that was given to me. I have an employee that becomes defensive very quickly during a call. When the customer's frustrated, I've talked with her numerous times and nothing changes. Any suggestions? If you have call recording software in place, start sharing those calls with her. Identify what happened and where she immediately became defensive. Understand what it is for her that causes that. That now becomes a coaching opportunity. If you do not have call recording software, now I need to create that as more of a role-play coaching situation, her and I demonstrating how to do it, letting her practice that in that situation. Don asked a question, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? And the answer is yes. You will receive a link here within the next 24 to 48 hours to that recording so that you can access that at any time. Other question. I have a CSR. I can hear her voice inflection change when she's in conflict with a customer. We don't have recording software. What would you do? Okay. One of a couple options. Call recording device on the desk to just even record one side of the conversation. Now you can just replay that with her so that she can hear that. As I mentioned, you can go on to Amazon. You can buy those devices for less than $10. The ones that we are using for the work we're doing they look simply like a USB drive. They're only a ½ inch long, and they go for less than $10, and they've got great call quality. Second thing, it would be just coaching on that situation. Here's what I heard in your voice inflection. Tell me a little bit about what happened in that conversation. Just getting her to create a different behavior, because naturally some of us are more emotional. She goes to emotion first. Okay. Question. For abusive customers, is it better for the customer service to say, I can't help you if you scream and swear, or better to end the call? Great question. In a calm manner, voice tones inflection, I simply want to help you in this conversation. But here's what I need from you. Now, if people are screaming, in this case, I will give them a minute, because if there's no reaction, then guess what? After a few seconds, if there's no what they'll call conflict, people will start, remember that emotion is running, they will start to run down. If there's conflict, now they have somebody to fight with, conversation escalates. But I want to just give them a little bit to hear their story, because right now they're telling it. Diffuse some of that emotion, and now if they start back into that manner, then I first want to explain what I'm going to help them do, and if they're continuing to be at that tone, my voice tone needs to be critical, and I want to help you, but if here's what I need from you. And if they're going to continue, conversation's over. What are your suggestions to improve documentation of phone calls? Good question. If we've had any kind of what I'll call significant conversation with one of our customers, I have their account. It's on screen in front of me. Depending on the type of software you have, there is just one tab that's going to take me to notes. So if it was a promise to pay, then I want to put it in there. If they gave me some kind of specific response, or we have some kind of agreement, I want to put a brief, clear, concise note that any other representative could read based on that conversation. Because that's where customers get into telling stories, is because they had a conversation, wasn't documented, so there's no proof of what was actually agreed to or promised. Doesn't need to be long and lengthy. Some people create Reader's Digest versions. But I need to make a specific result of our conversation, what was promised, time frames, whatever's relevant in that conversation. And I can tell you, in the calls that I have observed, because I do a lot of on-site work where it was an emotional customer, there was some kind of follow-up needed or what have you, that is a truly missed opportunity at most organizations to reduce customer conflict. The other part of that is this. Let's assume right now you have call recording capability. Customer calls in, something was set up, and now they're calling back, they want an extension, or they're calling to complain about something. Now it's a great opportunity to use the recording tool in your dialogue with them to say, you know, Mary, we do record all of our conversations for coaching purposes, and I can see by the notes you called in last Tuesday around 10 o'clock. You know, maybe we did make a mistake. Let me do this. Let me pull that recording and see if that's the case. Well, guess what? For most people, they know what happened. It's going to eliminate the conflict. If there's notes that say that I talked to them, it's an easy one to go back to. What types of things do not need to be documented? From my side, we just took a payment today. Unless there was some unique situation, they had a question about, their bill not showing up. I mean, something that would be minor things that aren't something we really need to track, not as critical. If they've had a major change of address or they moved to a new place, they've asked for their service to be turned off next Tuesday so that we make sure that we are meeting their expectations. We confirmed it. Now is that documented for that issue? Okay. All right. I do not see any more questions. I want to thank all of you for your participation in the session today. Have a great rest of the week, and you'll receive notification here in the next 24, 48 hours to the link should you want to review it. Have a great day. Goodbye.